Hello and welcome to the Plot Seconds, where I want to discuss true crime cases, specifically cannibalism cases, from a criminal justice perspective, to hopefully understand why these crimes were committed and different elements and types of crime. I graduated with my associate's degree in criminal justice with high honors last year, and while I was studying for my degree, the Ripper Crew case was one that I came to a lot just because it was so fascinating. The case of the Ripper Crew begins on May 23rd, 1981, with the disappearance of 28-year-old Linda Sutton. I want to include all the gory details because that's where we see the cannibalism and the true, ritualistic aspects of what they did, and also just to stress the severity of the case and my personal disdain for one of the perpetrators' release from prison. So Sutton's body was discovered 10 days after her death, horribly disfigured, having been raped, stabbed, and her left breast had been amputated with a piano wire. This pattern is consistent with each of the victims. Near where Linda Sutton's body was found, the police discovered that the gang had rented out a motel called the Brer Rabbit Motel. They'd rented out 4 separate rooms and they supposedly hosted parties, and it was very loud. The manager said that based on that they appeared to be in a cult. So these criminals, murderers, rapists went by the names of Robin Getz, Edward Spreitzer, and Thomas and Andrew Kokorales. Before any of the case actually happened, Robin Getz worked as a construction subcontractor, and he worked for John Wayne Gacy. I mean, I assume you know who he is. He's the killer clown who murdered 33 young boys. So Robin Getz worked for him. I mean, Getz says it's not true, and that it is something that Andrew and Kokorales made up during police questioning, but the authorities seem to have confirmed it. If they worked closely or not is unknown, but we know that it's true despite what Robin Getz says. According to one of the detectives who worked on the case, Robin Getz made Charles Manson look like a Boy Scout. And Charles Manson is the guy who he ran that cult that murdered 9 people. This one in the 60s and 70s. He was a musician. These guys, they would drive around in Getz's little orange van, and they would kidnap women before taking them back to Getz's house, which they called the Satanic Chapel. So ultimately, their plan was to sacrifice these women to Satan. However, first they took turn raping the women, and then they cut each of their left breasts off with the wire. This is really nasty. This is the really disgusting part. Okay. They masturbated onto the breasts, put them in a box. At one point, Thomas Kokorales said there was he's 15 in there. And then the part of the woman's body where the breast had previously been, they raped that. And then the breast that they put in the box, they cut it up and ate it. And while they were doing all that, guess what? Would read aloud from Anton LaVey's The Satanic Bible, which is really ironic actually, because the Satanic Bible promotes non-violence and kind of more of an eye for an eye type thing, but it certainly does not talk about sexually assaulting and murdering women, nor eating them. Not sure where they got that. Shift a little bit from the specific case, as I want to talk about Satanism and its relation to crime. It is important to preface, however, that far more crime and child abuse has been committed in the name of God, Jesus, and Muhammad than has ever been committed in the name of Satan. So Satanism attracts a lot of youth, not for purposes of spirituality, but for symbolism and to overcome senses of alienation. Despite this, several people commit gruesome crimes in the name of Satan. Some even claiming that Satan told them to commit the crime. Like the son of Sam, he said that his dog was possessed by a demon that told him to commit the crime. So researchers said that juvenile Satanism, while statistically shown to be relatively rare phenomenon, has a high criminal potential. Andrew and Thomas Kokorales were raised in a Greek Orthodox household, and some Satanists suggest that many are drawn to the religion because they were raised in religious, oppressive households. Whilst little is known about the brothers' actual upbringing, this offers a potential push towards Satanism for the two. Satanic panic was also particularly prevalent during the early 80s and sort of both popularized and bastardized the idea of Satanism. One of my criminal justice professors told me that crimes as a result of Satanism do not actually exist, rather that Satanism can often be blamed, but there is always a different cause. To understand why this crime, this case of the Ripper Crew, was committed in relation to the occult, I want to look into 4 specific theories: the subcultural theory, social disorganization, the broken window theory, and psychosocial theories. Okay, so firstly, subcultural theories, in which we categorize Satanism as a subculture, explain that some groups hold values that approve of or justify crime. In this case, the perpetrators claim to be acting for Satan, who is giving them permission to commit the crimes. Secondly, subcultural theories relate to the criminal concept of gangs. The Department of Justice classifies gangs according to this criteria: an association of 3 or more individuals whose members collectively identify themselves by adopting a group identity, which they use to create an atmosphere of fear or intimidation, whose purpose is to engage in criminal activity which uses violence or intimidation to further its criminal objectives, and whose members engage in criminal activity or crimes with the intent to enhance or preserve the association's power, reputation, or economic resources. According to this definition, we can fairly claim that the Ripper Crew was a gang. The group identity in this case was Satanists. The names given to the gang by the media furthered fear in the community, and they engaged in criminal activity by making sacrifices to Satan, and they were presumably expecting something in return from him. The theorists suggest that young people join gangs in order to gain a status, obtain power, for excitement, to have new experiences. So gangs in relation to criminology can often be explained to the social disorganization theory, suggesting that crime rates are consistent in areas with certain environmental conditions such as high employment, material decay, as well as high crime rates, leading into the broken window theory. So the Chicago Police Department states that there were 7,661 reported cases of aggravated assault, 878 reports of murder, and 1,266 cases of rape in 1981, amounting to only 5.1% of total citations and arrests that year. The broken window theory suggests that areas with high crime rates have high crime rates due to previous high crime, creating like an endless cycle of crime. Of course, not every person living in Chicago is a criminal, so these theories are often paired with other factors. And then this is where we get into the neuroscience. So lastly, criminologists typically define intelligence as the aggregate or global capacity of the individual to act purposely, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with his environment. Early 20th century researchers also believed that there was a direct connection between low intelligence and crime. Most research continues to strengthen this correlation. With this in mind, it has been stated that Thomas Koukourelis had a borderline rage intellect with an IQ of only 75. Thomas Koukourelis and Thomas Koukourelis alone, his intelligence or lack thereof, may have been an influence on his participation in the crimes. Okay, next I want to talk about victimization theories. So victim precipitation theory was initially introduced by criminologist Hans von Henzig. He suggested that in the case of violent crimes, some victims act in a way that provokes the offender and sets off like a chain of events that lead to victimization. I don't like this definition because it puts a lot of blame on the victim, especially in like rape cases. In this case, many of the Ripper's victims were prostitutes. So I really don't like this definition here. But I think it's relevant anyway, because this implies that the women are the center of the perpetrator's rage, right? And it can be assumed that women, or a specific woman, wronged them in the past. Prostitutes are also highly victimized for this reason, or because they are viewed as disgusting or less than for their line of work. Prostitutes are also high-risk victims, meaning their work forces them to be vulnerable, put in unsafe situations, as well as the fact that they don't usually have a large support circle. If they go missing, they don't have many people looking for them. This makes these women easy targets. It is possible that the crew believed they were doing the right thing by and helping to clean up the streets, or in my opinion, it's either more likely that they were vengeful against women as a whole, or believe that Satan would appreciate female sacrifices and prostitutes were the most readily available victims. Although not all of their victims were prostitutes, just most of them. Lastly, there is a phenomenon called the Wendigo psychosis. I don't know what a Wendigo is. It is a cannibalistic spirit or monster originating in Algonquian folklore. It represents famine and gluttony, and it essentially acts as a warning against excess and selfishness. So, Wendigo psychosis, it's seen as a psychological response to extreme deprivation and cultural beliefs, often treated with psychotherapy. As we know, at least half of the Rippers grew up religious, and all 4 of them became Satanists. The cannibalism was likely due to some form of religion psychosis surrounding Satanism. They may have believed Satan ordered them to eat their victims, or that they were doing what they believed would grant them the most favor with him. Unfortunately, there is no statement from any of the Rippers stating, like, yes, we ate the victims because Satan forced us to, etc., etc. But it's just a thought of why that may have occurred. So back to the actual case. After they killed Linda Sutton, they supposedly didn't kill again for a year. They abducted Sue Mack from Hanover Park. Sue Mack was an immigrant, and she was arguing with her brother in their car about how she had decided to marry an American man. And in the argument, she got out of the car at night and she began to walk home. And then that is when she was abducted by the crew. And then 2 weeks after the kidnapping of Mack, the crew took a prostitute by the name of Angel York in their van. They handcuffed her, slashed her breasts, and then threw her out of the van, still alive. Unfortunately, her description of her attackers didn't produce any substantial leads at the time. And their next victim, Sandra Delaware, was discovered dead by the Chicago River on August 28, 1982. She had been stabbed, strangled, and her left breast had been amputated, much like the other victims. On September 8th, 31-year-old Rose Davis was found in an alley with almost identical injuries to Delaware. Just over a month later, the gang shot a man by the name of Rafael Tirado, who was a local drug dealer, and Alberto Rosario in a random drive-by shooting. Spritzer said that he was driving with Get, who told him to slow down, took out 2 guns, and shot both of the men. Tirado passed in hospital, becoming the crew's only male victim. This was a strange act for the crew, as it didn't involve any of their typical ritualistic acts, and this isn't the usual type of victim either. I don't find much information about the specific aspect of the case, but I would assume there were some personal issues between Tirado and Get, as the shooting seemed otherwise unprompted and just completely out of nowhere. Spritzer also seemed pretty uninvolved in this decision to shoot these men. So the Rippers crew's reign of terror came to an end with the assault of Beverly Washington. She was found alive beside a railroad on December 6th of 1982. Her left breast had been amputated and her right breast was severely slashed. She provided authorities with a description of the attackers in Get's van, leading to the group's arrest. There are many other victims whose names we have, but we do not have any details of those attacks besides the similarities of the injuries. When Get was originally arrested, the police didn't have significant enough evidence against him, so they had to release him. And to this day, he has not given up his claim of innocence. They weren't able to try him for any of these murders due to this lack of evidence, but he still received 120 years in prison for the attempted murder, sexual assault, and aggravated assault and rape of Beverly Washington. He did plead guilty to taking indecent liberties with a child, but there's no more public information about that. He only got 2 years probation for that. At first, he was serving his sentence at Menard Correctional Center, but he's currently in Sumner on the Illinois and Key border, according to a letter which he wrote to a pen pal. He's actually got a few pen pals, apparently. He's got like a little weird cult following. This is one true crime creator who says that they are good friends and they write to each other frequently. He's got like some different like pictures of Get and like stuff. He's helpful for new information from him, but he seems really adamant on Get's innocence. And like, don't get me wrong, I am all for writing to prisoners and getting more information from them directly about their case and about the events of what happened. And I think it's really great when studying their cases and can be a really valuable way to get like inside their minds. But calling a psychotic murderer your long-term friend, a good friend. Okay, also, it's like teenage girls wrote to him, well, at least one of them, and just to get some more information about the case. And he starts it off with, wow, that's such a pretty name. Will you send me a photo of yourself so I can... Get's projected parole date is for October 10th, 2042. If he lives that long, he'll be 88 when he is released from prison, assuming he gets parole. And then Spritzer, in a bid for leniency, pleaded guilty to murder in the deaths of Sue Mack, Rose Davis, Sandra Delaware, Rafael Tirado, as well as attempted murder, aggravated kidnapping, deviated sexual assault, and rape for Beverly Washington. He sentenced life in prison without parole and was later also found guilty for the death of Linda Sutton. He was actually sentenced to death but in 2003 that was lifted to life in prison without parole after Governor George H. Ryan commuted the sentence of everyone on death row in Illinois. Andrew Cocorellis was Governor Ryan's only execution, funnily enough. Cocorellis was convicted of murder, aggravated kidnapping, and rape in the death of Rose Davis. In his trial, the jury was very back and forth on the death penalty. The prosecution sought the death penalty. The jury debated for 90 minutes and eventually decided to spare his life, but but he was sentenced to death anyway for the death of Lorraine Borowski. He was executed by lethal injection on March 17th, 1999. His last words were, "To the Borowski family, I am truly sorry for your loss. I mean this sincerely." He then cited verses from the biblical books of Exodus and Proverbs and said, "Repent ye, for the kingdom of heavens is at hand." I just think it's interesting how both he and Get reverted to Christianity in prison, like turning to God would ensure a happy afterlife for them, or bring back those poor women. If they didn't want to go to hell, they probably should have thought about that before they sacrificed women. I mentioned earlier that Thomas Andrew Kokoraleis was raised Greek Orthodox. The Orthodox Church actually tried to keep Andrew Kokoraleis alive from being executed, but were obviously unsuccessful. Demetrios Kantavelos, a chancellor of the Greek Orthodox metropolis of Chicago, became an anti-death penalty activist as a result of the execution, and helped lobby in favor of ending the death penalty in the state. So there is some good that came from the case, I suppose. Thomas Kokoraleis was convicted of murder and rape in the death of Lorraine Borowski. His trial was also a very back and forth one. He gave a very detailed confession, got life in prison. It was appealed. His rape conviction was reversed. He won a new trial for his murder conviction, and then he pleaded guilty to Borowski's murder and received 70 years. He was released from prison on March 29th, 2019, and as of June 30th, 2019, Thomas Kokoraleis lived at Wayside Cross Ministries at 215 East New York Street in Aurora, Illinois. He did an interview a few years ago with CBS Chicago.
Victims' families have never heard his voice until now. We are talking about Thomas Kokoraleis, a member of the notorious four-man Ripper crew, responsible for sadistic murders that terrified Chicago in the 80s.
Only on 2, CBS 2's Erica Sargent sat down with Kokoraleis for his first time on camera since his controversial release from prison back in March.
Thomas Kokoraleis is a sex offender, a convicted killer, linked to one of the most terrifying times in Chicago history.
Everybody thinks I'm a monster.
He and the 3 other members of the Ripper crew terrorized the city and suburbs in the early 80s. They're believed to have murdered as many as 20 women, raping and torturing them as part of a satanic communion.
They were attacked and mutilated.
Kokoraleis confessed and eventually cut a deal, pleading guilty to one of the murders. He got out of prison after serving just half of his sentence, and we got a look inside his new life at Wayside Cross Ministries in Aurora, including sitting down with him for an exclusive on-camera conversation.
I'm much calmer now. I'm nicer, not mean. I just have a bad attitude.
But what he doesn't want to do, ever, he says, is talk to the victims' families.
I don't want to talk to them.
You don't want to talk to them?
No,
There's
ma'am.
nothing that you want to say to that family?
No, I just want to say that I feel for them. I feel sorry for them. And I'm praying for them.
I just can't believe he's saying that. I just can't believe it.
Erica Sargent, CBS 2 News.
And that was the brother of one of the victims. You'll hear more of what he has to say about the shocking revelations revealed in Erica's interview with Kokoraleis tonight at 10 o'clock.
He also reverted back to Christianity, just following suit with Get and his brother, which he claims he was doing back then. He was just doing what his brother said. He was locked up for so long when he was innocent. And even if he did do anything, he was just following suit. Just doing what he thought he had to do for his brother. The blasphemy. Imagine walking down the street and just knowing that you could walk past this dude who, like, did such graphic things to those women. Like, it's terrifying. The fact that he is walking free today, I just can't comprehend it. Everybody thinks I'm a monster. Maybe it's because you are. So alas, this is how our case closes. With 17 women dead, at least 1 man dead, at least 3 victims left traumatized with what happened to them, 1 criminal dead, 2 in jail, and 1 walking free. As Satan says, you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But if your courtesy is not returned, they should be treated with the wrath they deserve.